All right, today we're going to go over how to make a macro, and the context in which we're going to apply that is going to be challenge number 17 from the Alteryx community. And so, that was the cat. And so in this particular challenge, it's going to be about month-over-month retention rate. Specifically, we're going to be given a data set, and a bank wants us to look at the data so that they can calculate customer retention rate month over month. And in addition to that, they provide us some more guidance the denominator for calculating retention rate is going to be all the accounts open 24 months prior to the start of the month, and then the numerator is going to be the total number of accounts closed by the end of that month. All right. So let's open it up and take a look at the data. I've already ran it, but I'll run it again for posterity. So the data itself is pretty simple. You have the user accounts and then their open and close date. So these two fields alone will be enough to give us a sense of whether an account is open still within a month or closed, all right? And so let's look at the results and kind of get an idea of how they want this delivered. So we have these three fields, and they want us to just simply sum up all the number of open accounts, closed accounts within the month of, and then of course the retention rate, okay? So looking at this, you don't need, it looks pretty straightforward, it looks pretty simple. You don't really need to make a macro per se, but as always, sometimes it's about efficiency and just good workflows. So macros are really built to do iterative stuff, and I don't know. For something really small, it doesn't matter, but for bigger things, it might be more effective to use it. So like I said, you can build a flat version solution to this, and this is what it would look like. So here you go, and this would be fine as well. So what I did here is, let me run this. So what I did here is, and I'll try to be fast about this, is I took the two date fields and then I calculated the formal date fields. That is, I formatted it in a form that Alteryx can read, okay? And then I've also converted all of them to the first of the month as something to compare against. Same with close the month. So for both of these fields, I converted to the first of the month values, because that's going to be what those are just the values I'll be using to kind of dictate whether something is still open or closed. And I'll kind of rush over this now, because when I go and build the macro, I'll probably talk I'll talk in more detail kind of what it all means. But I flesh out the dates in a more usable format. I sum up all the dates available within this data set. And because they explicitly say they don't want all the dates, they only want a handful, I purposely sort it so that I know that if more fields come in, it'll be in a form I can predict. And then I purposely skip the ones that I don't need. In this case, I just don't need, I think it's April, May, June. No, June, April, May. It's what is before April, January, February, March. Okay, so I do that. I have essentially a library of months of which ones I'm interested in, and then I append it back to the original data, because I want to compare these key months to the original data. All right, so I do that. Here I make a selection of which fields I truly need. So because these are the formats I need, I believe I don't. Well, let's see, start month. Oh, that's right. I create start month to create that dictionary. So I only select these four. I don't select start month. And I append it back. Here, let me go a little closer. I append it back to this original file. So the target is going to be this original file, and then the source of this append is going to be this dictionary of values I've created. And so now I have 40 records. What started off to be just 10 records now has each instance of this appended to it for a total of 40 records. And this is now prepped for me to just do calculations and determine whether things are still active or not. And so if we kind of read this out, let's just say record ID 1. So these are all the months that we're interested in. So in the first month of interest, January, February, March, April, May 1st, the way to read this out is May 1st, okay. Is he active? Well, he opened in the prior month, so he is active. but he closed a few days after the 1st of May. So is he active or not? By definition, if they're still active before the 1st of the month, they are active. So in this case, he is. But to calculate turnover and people who leave, that line is actually the end of the month. So if by the end of May someone has left, then we count them as a close. And so with that in mind, that's where you kind of build in this logic here in the formula tools and write in all of whatever you need in the expressions. And so by doing that and by doing the logic that I put in, and once again, I'll explain this later on when I build the macro. This is what I ultimately get. This fully fleshed out table and logic that figures out whether or not someone was open and whether they were closed within a certain window, okay? And then once you have this, it's really easy. You just summarize all the special months again, you count it, and then the last thing you have to do is just calculate the retention rate, which they told you. It's just the numerator, or it's closed divided by the active for these particular retention rates. And if you zoom out a little bit and compare, it is exactly the same thing. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 1, 2, 1. All right, there's no 6, I don't believe. Yeah, no 6. So we get the same answer with the flat file. But one thing that you should always look for, because it's a little bit more efficient, is if you're doing something over and over again, like an iteration, you should probably just throw it in a macro. It's a little bit more complex to build, but it's just more efficient in the data processing. So that is why this one is kind of built towards that. You can solve it through a flat way, but ideally you should build it through an iterative process. So without me, to avoid saying iterative a billion more times, let's create a macro in Alteryx to do these calculations, all right? So I'm not going to save this, I'm not really interested. So same thing, we got to prep the data for use. These are dates truly, but they're not in a format that Alteryx can use. And what I mean by that is these ones truly are just string fields. So if I connect it to here, you'll see that they truly are string fields, and this is a byte field, which we don't care. All right, so we need to convert this to a true date field. So there's a few ways you can actually do this. You can probably, actually, you know what? I don't know, actually. Will it automatically convert for me, or will it break? Let's see. Nope, it will break. It will break because it just doesn't recognize this formula. So if you're lucky, Alteryx actually can self-recognize something and convert it to date if it is in a very specific format. If it's not, then you'll see the following outcomes. It'll just null out, okay? So to that point, here's what I'll do. I'm going to put this back here again, just so we know where we're starting from, string, and then we're going to convert it, okay? We'll call this open date. Now, there's a few ways, there's a few ways to mess around with strings and turn them into dates. But for us, what we're going to specifically use is datetime parse. And what that's doing is it's going to parse through the string and pop it out as a usable Alteryx format. So the two values here is it needs a datetime, and then it needs the format of the string coming in. It's not the format of how you want it shot out, it's the format of how it's coming in. Datetime parse will default to a certain type of result, so you don't worry about that. So the datetime for this column, we're going to do open date first, is just open date. And then now you need to use the Alteryx syntax to dictate what's it like coming in. So actually, let me run this again so I have it on my preview window. So I'll have that for reference. So I see that it's first month, date, comma, because that's not unique, and then year. So we'll do that. So month is B, day is I think D, comma, and then years Y. Is it? And then the data preview window here is usually a good indicator whether or not you got it right. The fact that something popped up probably means that these are the right syntax for it. And so if you're a little confused about what to use here, one good reference you should always think about is the official documentation. And so what I mean by that is if you don't know anything that has to do with date in Alteryx, has paperwork on it. And so if we go here and go to the documentation for datetime functions, here's exactly where you can find out what the specifier is for what type of input. So in our case, we don't have anything with weekly, but we have month information. So if you look here, oops, it's the full month value. So let's go back to that. So we want the full month value, so it's capital B rather than small b, and then so on and so forth. You just look at the date, it's 2 digits, and the full year. So based on that, you write this out. So that's how you know what to do. And so now we're going to run it, and it'll be fine. So this is the input tab, this is the output tab. Output tab being the results, if you will. Okay, so as you see here, it all converted fine. I guess if you wanted to, I could have made a distinct column to actually know for sure, but I'm pretty confident that this is a nice one-to-one conversion. And I'm going to do the same thing with close date. All right, so I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's my washer going on. I'm just going to copy it just because it's the same thing. So right here. Okay, we'll run it and see now they're both cleaned up. All right. So now what we're going to have to do is similar to before. We're going to have to first create a library of months to reference. And so what I mean by that is, you know, by nature of the problem, I know for a fact that that has to do with May, June, July, August. So there's a few ways I can do this. I need to compare it to these 4 months, or I can just be lazy and refer to the data at hand. Okay, so that what I mean by that is I could literally just write in those values here for them to reference. Okay, but I'm lazy and I'm gonna like just look at the data and I see that, okay, well, it spans the months that they want anyways. So I'm gonna just summarize the months available to me. But because they're all different, the summarize tool is not gonna work quite yet. So I need to do one more step, which is I need to add a first of the month column because I need that for reference anyways, and it's gonna help me build my library. Because if you see here, we're only concerned about first of the month as the reference point. So let's do that. Do first month. So to get first month, it's another function that you have to just know. That function is going to be trim, datetime trim. Datetime trim, what it does is it takes in a datetime value and then it cuts off pieces. Okay. Once again, what's the syntax for that? Go to the documentation. So we go to trim, and these are all the various syntax you can use to use that function. Okay, so we're gonna use first of the month. Datetime trim. We want the open date, and then we want first of month. I think that's the one. Let's see. Yep. And if you notice here, the preview window it's going to give us the first of the month. It's also going to give us a time value. We're not really interested in that. This doesn't really remove it, but it kind of gets it out of our vision. So we run it, and voila, there we go. Okay. So that's enough for me to kind of cheat and just build my little library here. So I do that. I group it, and I'll use that for later for reference. But like I mentioned in the flat version, we don't actually need all this. We only need May to August. So I'm going to just remove the first one. And there's no guarantee that this will always come out like this. So as a matter of good practice, what I'll do is I'll just always sort it by the date. And then because I know it's already sorted properly, I'll do that. Well, I'll just run it. I run it, it's sorted. Okay. And then I'll just skip the first one. Now, in this very specific example, it works, but this is not necessarily practice that might apply across the board for other problems. So, yeah, just think about it if you're going to use it. In my case, it works. It's fine. So we do that. We skip the first one. We have the fields we want. So now we build our macro. So this is kind of tough. I think what's tough about this is, like, unless you have experience with building macros, you can't. Part of building macros is you have to like see a few steps ahead to know what you're building towards. And so if you don't have that experience, it can be kind of confusing as you're building, and then as you suddenly jump to the macro part of things, because you're like, where did that come from? So keep that in mind as you're following along, or if anyone is following along. I never get any views really, but yeah, just keep that in mind that it may not be intuitive what we're doing here. So we need to build a macro, right? But inherently you can't insert a macro. Well, you can insert a macro, but if the macro doesn't exist, then there's nothing to insert. So let's go and build a macro, in which we have to do it in another window. Okay. All right. So one thing we're going to need for macros is we're going to need the interactive tool. So come here and I'll bring it, or the interface tool. I always say interactive. All right. Some of you will have it automatically defaulted already. I don't, for whatever reason. I don't know how to get it to stay there, but yeah, it's never there. Oh, that was too hot. I regret everything. What is my time on this? Oof, 15 minutes. I gotta really wrap this up. Okay. So first and foremost, you need an input tool. That's where the data is going to feed into. For this to work, you need to feed it some dummy data. Usually what people like to do is they like to feed it whatever they're going to shove in there. In our case, it's going to be this. All right, so copy all records with headers. I'm just going to throw that in there, paste it. I don't know if there's a better way of promoting the first rows. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to manually put in these rows just as a reference point. It needs something, and that's the way to make it happen. Feel free to name an input. I'm going to say records in, I guess. I'll give it an anchor abbreviation. Once again, these are all just for your reference. Okay, so the data comes in. All right, now we just need to play around with it. Now to that, two things have to happen. As the data comes in, we need to now add a control so that it's iterative. That is, well, all right, let me take a step back, okay? So what's the iterative part of this, okay? It's not this. This is not the iterative part of it. We're going to shove this entire thing through as in one go. What's going to be iterative is these values. Each row is going to be shoved in separately and compared to this entire table uniquely, okay? So that's what we're iterating. So when I go back, when I say control thing, now I need to define how this works, how it's going to be shoved in there. One by one, okay? Because the macro input, that only accounts for the main table that's here, okay? So here's the point of effect, if you will. This formula tool, it could be anything really, but we're going to use a formula tool at this point. And what we also want to shove in this at this point is the iterative values, okay? So that's, to do that, you need to add a control parameter. This is the control of the iterative values. And you can name it whatever you want. So we'll call them onStart. All right. And so what are you going to do with this value? When it comes in, what do we want it to do? So I'm going to run this just so I can get something populated. Okay. What I want it to do is I want it to compare against each row to see whether or not there's somebody active based on these values. So to that, I'm going to create a column. It's going to be called start month. Okay. How do you reference the things that are coming through the iteration? It has a unique one. It's just called one. Oh, so this goes back to knowing how to use macros. So it is one, but it's not active because there's nothing connected to it. So we have to first save this macro. It's already saved here, but I'm going to just save this somewhere else. Just here, we'll just call this new workflow 2, okay? And we actually have to make it live here. So we're going to insert macro. And then it recognizes that there's something new, so we put it here. All right. The top part is the top upside down question mark is the iterative values that you're shoving in, so we'll put that there. The bottom one is just simply the data table, so we will do that here. Okay. And then you have to configure the macro. So what we're going to do is we go here. So control group. This one's going to be by first month, which is this. All right. How about this? Let's rename it so it's a little simpler. Start of month. Start month. How about that? Let's rename that. Stone. It's gonna be broken. Start month. Are you happy? There we go. Start month. Records and group field by. We don't need this. You don't want to group it. We want the whole thing going through. Okay. So that's fine. The questions now. Here's all the fields that it's looking for. It's just asking, hey, can you map it for me? So we have these fields. The reason why it's not doing it is because first I need to just shove information in there. It's kind of still dead. Also, you have to make sure that these values are in the correct format. So here it is looking for a date field and then month start. So let's run it, see what's available to us. So, golly. Why are you doing this to me? start record ID. Oh, I know. Oh, that's why I see. Okay, yeah. I thought that it would have been. Oh, you know what? Maybe I didn't do it. Oh, interesting. Oh, I know. It's because I replaced it. Okay, so it needs to be mapped, but Alteryx is very particular. So it not only has you have to map the same data types, and I can't do it right now because it doesn't see it. It sees these fields as strings, and I just verified with the select tool that these are all strings. And I thought that they would be in the correct date format because I use date functions to change them, but because they're originally strings coming in, they are exported as strings as the same. So we got to just manually go back in here and change it into what they are, which is date. Date, and if I run it, I should be able to see it. So it's still unmarked, but now it's better. And then now it's properly. So these are all the date fields, and then now you need the iterative fields. It's right there and should be fine. Okay, so it should be happy. So it's not happy only in the sense that, okay, you shoved the right information in me, but I'm not doing anything. And that's true because if you look at the macro, it's just going into this empty formula. So, but the whole point of that is to make everything a little bit more live, so that going back to this, now we can reference the control parameter. Now we can reference all the iterative values coming in one by one. And we do that by using one. Oh, come on. There you go. One, all right? So we'll run that, okay? And it's gonna be empty, but it's not truly empty. So let me show you. Okay, let's just say that's your output. I'm gonna do macro output. And I don't care about the abbreviation, okay? It's empty because it's a live input, and so we just don't see it. But when you run it for real, it will show that the actual dates. And I'm going to just randomly put +1 now here, just to show you at the end. So once you're done with this, save the macro so that this can update. See, update. And if we run it, and if we put a browse tool after it, we should be able to see, there we go. So start month. So see here, I added +1 to the string. So it did exactly what our flat file did. It basically just went through each iteration and added to the end. And so at this point, you might be asking, like, what's the point of this? Like, you know, if the flat file can do this, why haven't build it? Once again, it's kind of more efficient, but also the calculations is easier to handle when you're looking at things a little bit more parsed out, rather than having it all out. It works here, the flat, you know, sorry. Hold on, let me look at how much time is. Wow, 23 minutes. So in this instance, in this example, actually the difference between the two is so minuscule because the data file is so small, but in a bigger, more complex data set, iteration would be the easier way to go, just because it's easy to do calculations on you know, small batches rather than doing it on everything. Because when you do it on the full table, you have to now take into consideration the quirks of every single possible combination of the entire table. Whereas with iteration, you only have to keep in mind that moment of that month. So in our case, we would only have to like look at things within that month and not worry about things within multiple months compared to the open and close date, okay? And if that doesn't quite make sense to you, I don't really want to spend much time because I'm watching the time and I don't want this to drag on and on, but just take my word for it, that sometimes it's just easier to do calculations with with an iterator, okay? So anyways, that was a long digression, but basically I ran this just to show you that there was something coming in, even though within the macro itself we don't see anything, and it's only because it's live. So actually, one bougie way to do this, if you do want to see something, because you tend to want to see something when you're trying to build a macro, is you can kind of lie to the system. You can make like a fake value. And so what I mean by that is, if you do something like if 1 is null, okay, which it will be, okay. Just give it some temporary placeholder value. So in this case, it's going to be, we'll just say 2013, 05, 01, all right? And then because this is a string, we're going to we're gonna format it. All right. So I think it's, we datetime parse it again. We do that, and then same idea. So I think it's, what is it? I always forget. Try and look at the reference quickly. So it's gonna be year, month, and then day. Okay, so what I'm saying is, hey, look, if it's 0, just give it this random, this temporary placeholder. If it isn't, then legit give it that value. All right, when we run it, this should now populate with, oh no, it didn't. If is null, is it empty? Is that the difference? Okay, sometimes, oh yeah, if it was null, I would have seen null. So it was empty, not null. That was the small little change. But now you have a placeholder value that you can work with and do calculations. Okay, and this doesn't hurt the macro. This is just a temporary value. Actually, case in point, let's run it. Well, so one other thing, whenever you run the macro again, you have to be sure to save it. Otherwise, this will not update. So we'll save this. This will self-update. We'll run it again. And see, it still works. It's perfectly fine. See? Perfectly fine. So now we have a value to look at. Now let's do some calculations. All right. So if you notice here, we're only dealing with 1 month. That is May 1st. And so this is a lot easier. So let's just start doing calculations. So let's calculate active. All right. So this is pretty simple in terms of like figuring out who's active and who's not. Because obviously, look, if your open date is before the start of the month, then you're probably active. Yeah, why don't we just start with that, okay? So if, if open, or you know what, let's take a step back. Okay, so let's do some true false Boolean results first to get a better scope of things. So is open less than start month? Let's do that, okay? And we'll make this Boolean so it's true false. Let's do that. Okay, so true. Okay, so does this make sense? This guy opened in 4 in the month prior, and he closed the month a few days after first of the month. That is true because the way they calculate true is as long as it's open before the first of the month, they are. Okay, so that's good. Second one, is he open? That's good. I mean, that looks good. So are we done? Well, let us put in another dummy value here just to test. So let's go to, say, next month, June. So true. So let's see. So this guy opened in March, that's fine. This guy opened, that's fine. This guy opened in April, May, but he closed in July. So that's still fine. That's still fine. So I think we're good. Let's do one more. True. That's a lot of trues. Hold on. Oh, so here's a good example of how this is not. Oh, I should have caught that actually prior. So this first one keeps ringing true, but he shouldn't because it's, you know, early on in the earlier months, it was true he was still active, but he's officially closed as of this date. So we need to actually write in some logic where it's saying, and the close date is greater than oh, that's, why did I do that? I might have to look at that later. First month. What is first month? Why did I throw that in there? Open date. First month. Oh, I see. This is the month to do the. We actually need another one. We need to build one for a close date as well. So let's do that. Close. We'll call this. I'll leave it just so I'm kind of lazy. I don't want to mess with all the different references. All right, so that should work too. Oops. Let me also do this. Just make it visually more appealing. I'm going to take first month close. That's fine. All right, so run that again. Oh, I need to map it. What? What's happening here? First month close does not like it. Interesting. Why does this one have data values? Date? That's fine. Date. Interesting. Why is it? Huh. Kind of spazzed out or something. How very odd. Okay. So I don't know why it spazzed out there for a second, but I just reran it doing nothing and it worked. Where am I at? Ooh, 30 minutes. Well, we're getting pretty close there. Okay, so let's do that. Expression cannot end with an operator. Oh, it's just not happy, that's all. Here. I want to run it so I see what my fields are. Okay, so those are my fields. So, oh, I know. I need to fix the reference. Duh. I'm so silly. Copy all records with headers. Or no, without headers. Actually, I lied. What's important here when you put in the values themselves may be important for you to build the macro, but what's truly important is the field values, okay? So that's what you have to always remember. So we're gonna put this here. I'm gonna just do okay. First month close. I need to remember the name. First month close. We'll do that. Now it should be happy. There we go. First month close, okay. So let us just open date, start date, and the close date. Let me think about this. Close date. Yeah, close date is greater than the first month, right? That should be at least somewhat true. So that is correct, true. And you closed. No, this should not be true. So first month. Let's see. Open date is less than start month, and let's close. Okay. Oh, you have to also. Oh, you have to also say it's. Or if it's empty, close date. Double bracket. Gosh. Open date and start month. Oh, start month is less than close. Start month less than close date. 4. Is that right? So start month is less than the close date. Huh. A little brain fart here. What's going on here? So we're saying open date is less than start date. Start month, that's fine. And also as long as the start month is less than the close date, that's fine and is null. Or if it's null, the close date. It should be true. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I think that should be fine. Yeah, okay. This should be able to capture because I'm saying that as long as the open date is less than the start month, this guy should be active, and that's the first criteria. And he's either going to have a start month that is less than the close date, which is true, or he has open date less than start month and the close date is null. Okay, so those two, yeah, that's the two conditions. Oh, I had a weird little brain fart there. So that, yeah, there's that. And then we also have to also do the close. Close, and that's pretty simple. That is pretty simple because all we're saying is, so close date, the thing that's kind of tricky about that is to dictate someone who has left the company. It's somebody who closed by at least the end of the month. So the way for me to do this kind of in a tricky way is I'm just going to compare the month that we're looking at, the start month, with the close date diminished down to the first of the month. That's kind of why I created this field, because logically, if it's within the month, if the close date is within the month that we are thinking of, which is the start month, then it's considered close. And so I converted it all to just the first of the month. I could have done it the 30th, but it's just a matter of how you get there. So it would still work. So really, all you have to say is we're going to do the Boolean thing. We'll do first month close equals start month. Okay, and if it equals, then logically they close within that month. All right, and we're going to do Boolean. And we're going to do false, true, true, false. Okay, so this value is good enough. We can add one more step later on to kind of convert that into a value, but we're going to kind of save ourselves a step and just convert this to a binary value. So we'll make it an if statement. If this is true, 1, 0. All right. Byte. Similarly here, this is true. All right, make this a byte. 1, 0, and then yeah, just shove some stuff in there then. Okay, so we want to do start month, group, and then just sum these ones up. Remove the rename, although it doesn't matter, for 2. Okay, and then we need to find the retention rate, so let's add that value in. The retention rate is just the numerator divided by the, or just close divided by active. All right, so because it's a percentage, or if you run it, it's probably going to have like a really long number, or it will be if it's if it's not a very friendly number to divide. So we're just going to beat them to the punch and change it to a fixed decimal, and we're going to say the decimal point can at most be 2. All right, so we'll rerun that, 50, and I think we're done. And then our macro is done. So let's zoom out a little bit. It's really small, pretty simple. Had a little brain fart there, but our macro is done. We'll save it so that it is now live. We come back here, and Alteryx will always update macros if they're refreshed. Okay, and then we'll zoom out a little bit. Okay, so what this should work in theory is, and ignore the exclamation mark. It always spazzes out. Just rerun it, and it should be fine. But the way this should work now is, okay, it's going to first identify the group of months that we're interested in. Once again, this path is not necessary. It's just my lazy way of doing it. You could have manually put it in, but you do need this table at some point. Either you manually do it or automatically do it. You do need it, okay? So I'm going to take this and iteratively compare all my customers and the close and open values to each month and determine for them whether they are active or closed. And I'm going to do it through the function of a macro, in which it'll do that and it'll just do the calculations and calculate whether it's 0 or 1 for active or closed, and then do those calculations. So let's run that through. So there you go. See, it disappeared. The macros are just kind of finicky about things. And the answer is going to be active, closed, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 1, 2, 1. So if you look at the answer, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 1, 2, 1, 0.3, 0.5, 0.3, 0.5. So that's the answer. And so that is how you make a macro iterator. Yep. This is going to be a little awkward because I need to find how to stop this thing.